Commission meeting for Wednesday, October 19th. Please join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a motion to enter executive session to discuss the employment history of 5 particular employees, matters related to collective bargaining with the EAFA, EEAA, and EASCSPA, matters related to pending litigation, and matter relating to a particular student. So moved by Mrs. O'Reilly, seconded by Mr. Cassidy. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Carried 7-0. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We're returning from executive session where we discussed the employment history of 5 particular employees, matters related to collective bargaining with the EAFA, EAAA, and the EACSPA, matters related to pending litigation, and matter related to a particular dispute. We have one agenda change.
Yes, I just wanted to add an additional superintendent's comments. This will be brief, but we've done a lot of hiring this past summer, and we've had a lot of really wonderful people join us. And so we've asked them to come to the board meeting so they could just be introduced to the board and to the community. And so tonight, I'd just like to go through the list. We have Amy Cartwright, who's a counselor in Parkdale. Madeline Peters, who's a long-term sub in AIS at Parkdale. Heidi Dial, who is a special education teacher for our pre-K program at Parkdale. Carly Graves, who is a pre-K teacher in the integrated classroom at Parkdale. Madison Weiner, who is a special ed teacher at middle school. Katie McGarity, who is a long-term sub at 5th grade at the middle school. Mary Chambers, who is our behavioral specialist, and she works pre-K through 12. And Lauren Simo, who is a special education teacher in the middle school. Megan Heelick, who is a long-term sub in AIS at Parkdale. And Allison Victor, a long-term sub in 2nd grade. So we'd like to welcome you. And
Any other agenda changes?
that's it.
Okay. Moving on to item 4, reports and discussion items. We're going to begin with the audit.
Well, Justin is with us from EWP, who is our external auditor. And so they've gone through an extensive process. I'd like to thank George and her team, who's worked very closely with the auditors and the audit committee. Mr. Blados was the audit committee. It's a very extensive process. And so you can see the response and reports. There's a lot to it, but he's not going to go through all of this right now. He's going to give us a synopsis and then open up to any questions.
So if you want to follow along, I'll talk about 5 or 6 pages out of this graph analysis. As you mentioned, we had a good hour-and-a-half discussion with the audit committee, and very detailed. So if you want to go to page 3 of that report, there's the first and the whole crux of us coming out here to provide our opinion, whether or not your financial records are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. You received a clean audit opinion, no modified wording, nothing like that. So that's what you're tracking for each year. So good job, Joanne and her office. Next page, because you're considered a government entity, we also have to provide you another letter that's related to government auditing standards. There is a finding on this report, but it's really related to putting together that 100-page document. In a perfect world, the district will put it together on their own. Nobody does that. So every audit we do, we get that finding, just letting the reader of the financial know that, yeah, we played quite a role in putting this document together. The next page is another letter because we received over $750,000 of federal funds. We were required to have what's called a sale audit. And we were required to pick a program, do some sampling, risk assessments, and look at what program. And actually, it's kind of easy this year. The federal government told us we needed to audit the COVID response monies. So that's what we chose to audit for the single audit this year. And there are no findings related to any of that testing. So that all came back clean. Then we'll get into some numbers. talk about the overall GASB 34, which is starts on page 7. This is your consolidated financials essentially, and it rolls up the long-term items. So, your day-to-day books don't have fixed assets and long-term data. This does. Overall, a good year in the GASB 34. Most school districts saw a pretty good year on that statement. The TRS and ERS pension systems were actually assets this year, and there were liabilities last year. That ended up being like a third district, $3.5 million. And so you had a good year on the GASB 34 statements, made about 4.7 million. But really, it's all because of the paper movement on the ERS and TRS pension. And because of the timing of that pension system and when they measure it, and it's very market driven, it's probably going to be the exact opposite next year. So, there's nothing really you can do about it. No control you have over it. It's your small piece of the pie of the overall pension. Whether they think they're, could be sure funded or whether they think they're in a shortage. Want to go to page 10? We'll talk about the general fund. The general fund actually made about 415,000 this year. Your fund balance, including reserves, so unassigned reserves, designated fund balances, about $6.3 million right now. So pretty strong year. We saw that across the board. A lot of districts kind of realized the savings stuff with those COVID grants, where we're going to shift some funds, things like that. We want to talk on page 14, the revenues and expenses. So start with general fund revenue. Your general fund revenue is up about $2 million. It's mostly state aid and somewhat taxes drove that. Most schools saw an uptick in basic aid. That did help you some, and then your tax increase. Page 16, your general fund expenditures. Those are also up about $2 million. It's in salaries and benefits really. So as mentioned, you hired 2 people. So that's where a lot of the costs are here. If you want to go to page 22, that's the food service fund. The food service fund made about 186,000 this year. Ending fund balance about 404,000. So another strong year there. Most school districts saw a pretty strong year. The COVID, everyone free was continuation throughout this year. That was the 21-22 school year. That is going to be going away, sometime in the near future. So that's something to plan for. But overall, you want to look at page 23. Your revenues are up about $465,000 for the school lunch fund. It's really because of meals there. Last year you were at more of a hybrid system. Didn't have kids in the classes every day, so the meals were kind of down for what you normally do. You served 69,000 lunches last year, and this current school year that we audited, you served 143,000. So that's really what's driving that. So reimbursable meals. Page 25, food service expenditures. It goes hand in hand with the meals. Your biggest expenditure over there by far is the cost of sales, the cost of food serving. So that also increased corresponding meals. If you want to go to page 30, we'll talk about your special aid fund. So your special aid fund is what houses your state and federal grants. You'll notice this year, quite often we don't really talk about this page too much because it's pretty consistent. It's just Title 90A and things, your allocations are pretty consistent year to year. But your COVID response monies had to go here this year. You'll see there that page quite the increase, quite the jump. It's spent about $1.6 million COVID money right here. And then to wrap it up on page 32 is the management letter comments. So these are they don't rise to the level of a finding. They're just kind of best practices or letting you know something is coming. The first one is GASB 96. So that is related to subscription-based information, technology arrangements. So any arrangements for things like Microsoft Word, for instance. Like if you had a long-term arrangement, there's usually like almost a lease that accompanies that. We're kind of fingers crossed. I think it's not going to affect the school districts too much. The way the BOCES coasters are set up, they're more annually. Anything that's under 3 years isn't going to be affected by this. So as of right now, we don't think it'll have a big impact. We kind of thought the same thing about GASB 87, and then somehow it's squeaked its way in, and we had to do stuff related to that year. So you never know what rules they'll come up with. That is coming for next year. The second comment is on Smart School Bond Act. That is related to, you have the Smart School Bond money through New York State that you're allowed to utilize. The funding of that has been kind of slow. I guess that's the next way to say it. The state is kind of dragged their feet a little bit on paying that back. You guys do have a fund deficit in one of your capital projects funds where this was housed. You do have your reimbursement filed for. It does seem like you'll get it sometime soon. But we're just letting you know that, when you look at your financials, this looks like you have a $600,000 loss in the fund. Well, you have quite a receivable out there that's going to upset that. And then the last manager letter comment, we do also provide you an audit of your school lunch or your extracurricular activities, so your extra classroom funds. That was a clean audit letter. We do provide a management letter on that as well. And our management letter comment there was on point of sale records. That's really, we give that comment to every school district. There's so many hands involved in those clubs, advisors, the students, that oftentimes the records behind the receipts isn't always there. Any questions, anything?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And congrats, Joanne, and your husband. Thank you.
Before we move on, I'd just like to thank Paul for his leadership on the audit committee and for AJ Block and Bill Cadet for their participation.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item B, report and discussion on the proposed capital improvement project.
So we have a project coming up, to a vote on December 14th. Until we scheduled a series of presentations and opportunities for the public to ask questions and for us to give them answers. Tonight's the first one of those nights, and we have Steve Sharowski is one of our architects from Young and Wright. Steve Deckard is here with us, engineers from BCC, and Rick Cansey is here with us from Capital Markets. So they're ready to answer questions, but Steve's going to do a quick presentation, and then we'll open it up.
Good to be back, everyone. I am going to make this quick. The presentation is very similar to what you've seen in the past, but just as a refresher for anyone in the audience that might not have seen it, especially for you guys, we get into conversations about the project. So 3 main points: the summary of what's in the project, the budget, and then the schedule here moving forward. We're getting very close to that December vote time period. So it's very exciting all around as we've kind of finalized what we're looking at, and the numbers have come together nicely. So it's really just about making sure all the questions are answered and we highlight these then. So the real crux of the project, I think, stems from life safety concerns from the building condition survey report. As you recall, building condition survey was completed for the district last year. That report was turned over to the Board of Education and to the district. And from that report came with a list of items that were high priorities. At Parkdale Elementary in particular, the real items that we're focusing on in this project are PA systems, clocks, security cameras, some doors, mechanical work, a lot of infrastructure improvements to the tune of around $800,000 in the grand scheme of things. At the middle school here, same basic principles: fire alarms, clocks, in addition to some much needed facilities improvements, roof replacements on the last bit of roofs that weren't replaced in previous capital projects, and then some interior renovations. This space in particular, the library, the family and consumer sciences room just around the hall, totaling around $13 million. Once again, a little bit of history here. This was the original auditorium for the building, and a big portion of the renovation project here will be to convert this library into a more contemporary library, maintaining book space, maintaining learning space, bringing in technology to supplement those elements, adding flexible learning spaces, making the space also brighter, more inviting for students, for the community as well, to house events like this, like Board of Education meetings. So concept rendering, obviously it's very early. We haven't met with any staff to determine final layouts, but ideally opening up the ceiling above us here, which is actually a 2-story space, and increasing just the overall atmosphere of the room. Additional work here at the middle school, there's some focus on finishing work from previous projects, whether that be the first floor hallways, some toilet rooms that weren't completed in the previous project, and elevator replacements and renovations, which is another safety and accessibility issue. And then at the high school, to round out the project, obviously, again, clocks, PA systems, and fire alarms, but a large investment of time and effort on some site improvements, parking lots, making sure that those are stable and long-lasting, as well as a good amount of investment in the athletic complex area. Obviously, you have a beautiful turf field already, but the tennis courts were one of the only items in the entire building condition survey report that really met a failing grade, just because of the failing substrate and the failing conditions there. So the new project, the new proposal here is to build 6 new tennis courts adjacent to the existing turf field, and then with that, construct an additional turf field behind it for additional play area and surface area. This would all be, the extent of that is all contingent upon budget. We're obviously very conscious of how expensive these elements and renovations would be. But looking ahead as part of a first step for a long-term plan, looking at the entire site, understanding there are concerns with drainage, with water issues on the site. This would involve drainage systems for the areas of work that are being renovated. And then as a part A to a future down the road plan, 10, 15 years, whatever that happens to be, to look at baseball, softball fields, drainage, new complex areas, new accessibility, lighting, dugouts, etc. Some notes on that here, obviously. So I mentioned a little bit about the unknowns with this. The project is built, I think, in a very creative way. There's a few items that we've discussed and brought up in the past as our alternates, additional scope items to capitalize on as the next highest priority items if money is available. We always hope for good bid numbers on bid day down the road when this is finished being designed. Money left available would allow us to capitalize on additional classroom renovations at Parkdale, pool bleachers, high school athletic hallway renovations, in addition to additional lighting at the turf field. So there's some flexibility in the referendum in the way the project is constructed, so that once the main items are done, if there's money available, some extra things can be backed off the list. That gets us the budget. So I hit on a couple of the numbers as we went through here, but in total, it's up to a $22.3 million project, broken down about $800,000 at Parkdale, $13 million at the middle school, and $8 million at the high school. That gives around what I would say is a $500,000 contingency across the board there. With the market volatility now, that is highly recommended. We're hoping that that doesn't get used up for the items we've already talked about, and we're back presenting great options to you in a year and a half or 2 years that we've got $500,000 to spend on something else, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Contingency is on top of the estimated escalation.
Yes, correct. Yeah, there is money built in for escalation, for design and construction contingency. This is sort of an extra buffer on top of that. So in summary, where this sort of gets funded from in general, a lot of them funding is coming from the existing capital reserve. The state building aid covers the largest component of it. That is obviously the most important part of any school's project, is capitalizing on the available building aid so that it's not coming from local taxpayers, so that it's coming from the state fund. And then this project does incur a tax impact, but that is 1% or less. So the existing capital reserves is around 1.78 million. That would be leveraged to offset the local share. The remaining local share would be covered by that tax impact. And as I mentioned, there are those additional alternates built in to capitalize on remaining money at the end of the day. But we do feel confident with contingency, the escalation factors, and then that $500,000 bonus to ensure that we are underneath that 1% tax impact and getting all of the work. Schedule, well, I went through things pretty quickly here tonight, but we do have a series of items on the agenda moving forward. November 1st, 16th, then December 7th as 3 future dates where we'll be back presenting again. The first community forum, the middle school cafeteria, then the next Board of Education meeting on the 16th of November, and a final community presentation and tour on the 7th of December before the vote on the 14th. That's it. So, like I said, I went through it quickly. I can go back to anything if I skipped over stuff.
Thank you for board members. Any questions, comments?
I just have a quick one about the tennis courts and the salvage and the potential add-on. So when, right now in the proposed project, are those courts going to be ripped up? So going forward, what are they going to do? Is that all getting ripped up and you're talking about salvaging the two? So how would you make that decision? Do you wait till the end before you, that's what I'm trying to.
So
The ones that are existing.
yes,
now.
there's the 6 new courts that are being designed and built regardless. Through the design process, we would take cores and geotechnical investigations of the existing courts to find out which are the most stable. And then meet with the athletic department and the coaches to figure out if it's the 2 closest to the trees or the 2 farthest from the trees that make the most sense keeping, and then decide based off of that which ones get torn out. So it would all happen at the same time. It might be early in the summer, late in the summer. There could be a way to schedule it so that the existing courts are used while the new ones are built, and then they get torn out after, so that you never lose any time period to be able to play. But that would all be determined.
Yeah, I guess I was trying to understand for this, or if it's going to be part of an add-on. When do you make that decision about tearing them out? Because if you're tearing them out and we don't make the decision for the add-on for 1.5 years, how does that work? I guess that's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, we are about 1.5 years away from construction.
Okay.
So we make it around bid day. In that project, we would structure it so that the existing and the new courts were designed at the same time. And then when we got the bid dollars in on bid day, maybe one is an alternate, and then be able to have that discussion as soon as new bids are awarded, see where the money is.
So when you take bids, Kim, on all the work,
Uh-huh.
based on great competition, which is the goal to get, a lot of competition and looking at when the numbers come in under budget, depending on how much under budget, add that to the contingency you're carrying, and then look at the prioritization of the options, then the district can make decisions on which options.
Other questions?
When is the date? I don't recall the,
For bidding.
based on our timeline, what would we anticipate that?
So we would be targeting the first round of bids. Steve, what did we say? Was it December of
Let's see, so
20?
the referendum is this December.
Yep.
So you've got about 9 months of design, I think we said.
Yeah, so it's in 24.
Yeah, I think we said like January, February-ish of 24 at first.
How long are things taking at SED now? The approvals?
8 to 10 weeks,
Oh,
supposedly.
It was like 9 months for design.
I know.
I have one project right now that is on 3.5 months without approval, and I have another one that got reviewed in 6 weeks. I cannot explain. I wish I could.
So with bid date being so far away, we have no idea where the economy is going to be at that point. We have no idea what the recession that we're heading is going to be doing to us. So to have those built-in buff, that extra 500,000 built-in buffer seems to make a ton of sense.
We're seeing an incredible amount of volatility from month to month right now. And depending on where a project is or what the schedule is, even here with the culvert project that was discussed and done, we had 12 bidders attend, which for a small job is exceptional. We were hoping for 3 or 4, and 12 people turned out on bid day, which is great news. There's no guarantee that that'll happen on the next one, right? I mean, that's the hit or miss of a job, how exciting it is when the schedule is and if people are busy or not.
Question? No? Then I would like to move on to item C. This is when we would open the discussion up to community members. And we'd ask anyone if they'd like to ask a question or make a comment on the proposed capital project, or keep our comments to the capital facilities project. But if anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment, now is a great time.
Yes.
I saw several options for,
Good morning. Sorry, I'm just gonna set the course that we.
okay, Becky, Morning, South Wales, New York. The HVAC improvements in several of the, I believe, in the middle school and the high school. Do you have more specifics on what that entails?
Yes, we do. So at the middle school here, there's a portion of the building that didn't get air conditioning in the last project. So that would be one of the improvements. The second improvement is set up the entire first floor of the building. The older units in that area of the building were not replaced. Those are scheduled to be replaced as part of this as well. The mechanical and HVAC improvements at Parkdale are largely older air conditioning and heating units serving IT spaces. So if those fail, you lose all your computers in the building. So there's a bunch of those that do need to be replaced. And then at the high school, it's a combination of rooftop air handling units and interior units, some of the larger units that serve a couple of larger spaces like the gym as well. Those are all on the schedule. The high school ones I should mention are some of the alternate items on the bubble for what would be done there.
Okay, Superintendent Russ has indicated at the beginning of a year or so ago that it was in his plan to do overall air purification. Is that part of the money anywhere?
Overall, I would say not necessarily, but every room and every space that's getting renovated is going to have the latest and greatest technology for filters and filtration systems up to current and exceeding current codes.
Filters, but not purification.
What do you mean by purification? Is that there's
Well, with
different terminology?
filters, I guess if you could think of it as a balloon in this room, okay, is say a balloon being a particle, a particulate. Okay, if you're going to have filtration, how are you going to get that balloon to that filter? Or purification?
So a lot of older systems don't have the necessary air changes per hour that would actually draw the air and draw that balloon to the filter. The new systems have increased air changes that are significantly better than what the old systems were, that get them to the new filters that allow for the air to be filtered out and purified.
Yeah, supply and return would always bring that balloon back to the filter. That's supply.
It's a very difficult job, as you and I well know.
Well, that's, I mean,
Typically,
the
you send
engineers
us,
designed the system to have X number of CFM of supply and return. And then at the end of the project, once everything is installed, the balancers come in. They gauge the CFMs of supply and return. They develop a report that demonstrates that the system is performing the way it was designed.
but like I said, you and I well know, it's my part of, it's my business, that unless you send a solution, it's very difficult to take care of the particulate in a large space. So we'll just go on with that. I'll analyze things as things are done. Regarding the turf, the second field, what is the purpose of the second field if it's not going to be baseball?
Soccer, lacrosse, and field hockey. It is a regulation size soccer field to supplement the field that is currently in place so that you would not have scheduling issues and conflicts that are currently existing on the current field. Would allow for multiple sports to be played at the same time, allow for multiple gym classes to be out there at the same time, especially with the wet conditions on the grass areas of the field that make it right now.
Okay, the NFL specifically is a lot of them that have gone to turf fields have found that their rate of injury has greatly increased and they're turning to grass fields. I attend a lot of the football games, just I'm concerned, and it seems to be an awful lot of injuries who are youth athletes. Has that been taken into,
It has. It's a valid concern that is expressed very, very often, but a lot of the studies and all of the studies that we've read and researched, there are comparable to different injuries that occur. There's always going to be some injuries that happen, unfortunately, to athletes in any sport. From our understanding and from conversations with the athletic department here, the rate of injuries that have occurred since that new turf field was installed is no greater than it was prior to that turf field being installed existing here.
May I comment on that as well? So much of the research that's been done on the injuries to athletes has been done in Division I schools, and it does show approximately 3%, it's like 2.97 or something percent increase in cruciate ligament injuries as well. And then as you go down, that extends to some ACL injuries. But some of the things that the studies are saying, what are those exact injuries? So there is a slight increase, but those studies do not, they're very clear to say we do not take into account the injuries that are occurring on the slippery grass. And those are completely different. Those are some of the cruciate ligaments, but it's more ACL, but it's more concussions. It's more, there's a wider range of injuries that are occurring. So when you balance out what is the injury, there is a balance. And there's a ton of studies, and I'll bring more of those to the next one because I find it really important as well. So I'll bring more of those studies as well. But we should note that the majority of the studies are they're almost all football, at least in this country. And like you go from England and Germany, they're soccer. But they are Division I and then down, not as many with high school.
Regarding the baseball, I don't think the baseball team ever got on the current field. Is the best use of money, for a turf when you're saying, I think you said 5 to 10 years for a baseball field? I think that's what he said. Is that
That's
right?
as an estimate.
As an
Yeah.
estimate. And I wasn't here for this, or I don't have knowledge of this, but you mentioned the culvert project. Is that to drain those fields?
That was the culvert project. For a little bit of background, there was a pipe that rotted and failed.
Okay.
So it has to do with drainage, but it's not related to the fields.
So I was born and raised on a dairy farm, and whenever we had wet spots in the field, we would tile it. And the tile would be connected to drainage, and then you could have usable farmland early in the season so that you could plow and drag. Wouldn't that be something helpable in the next near future so that the kids didn't have to go to Hamlin or whatever? They could, because those fields are a disaster. They're unusable in the spring. And when is it wet? In the spring or late fall, but not. Just something going forward.
Yeah, it's that part of it's definitely kind of a work in progress. So as we were planning for this project and trying to look out, what would the space look like? What are the issues and concerns that we're having right now, and what are some possible solutions for it? And Steve was saying that this is the next phase, and then the next phase for consideration would be that ball diamond complex at West. Again, we have to weigh, the opposite financial concerns, the conditions of the current fields, and all those types of things. And that would be a part of the project, like saying this one's going to be about 3 years. So we'll look at the next planning phase towards the end of this one. So we're talking at least 5-7 years from now. So again, that's a change, but it's we're trying to be mindful of the long-term needs while also addressing more immediate. So yeah, it's definitely would be that is stone. It's just a consideration.
I guess what my point is with the drainage, it's a relatively quick and inexpensive fix so that those fields can be usable. You know what I'm saying? That I would say that something like that should be up in priority just because they're useless. They're unusable. Very, like I said, installing, tile is very cost effective and very quick to repair, bring it back to grass back.
And part of the study before we even made a proposal was they took a look at the drainage issues at the high school, brought in some experts. They can look at specific areas. I don't know, Steve, if you want to comment on that beyond it, just to give us some idea of where we're at. There should be related with drainage, the parking lot and those.
Yeah, so it's The drainage issues at the high school stem from an overall system issue and capacity issue. There are even some concerns at the drains at the building. So there's currently an ongoing study to map out all of the existing lines under the parking lots and under the buildings. I don't want to say it will solve the issue because it's been a long-standing issue. We understand that with the baseball field, but there is a possibility that there's some type of blockage that we're going to discover that's been making the last couple of years worse. Something that might have been done over the last 3 or 4 years that caused another one of the lines to collapse, similar to the line that we just had to schedule to replace. They're of a certain era and age that they rust out, and that's where the failure occurs. I think maybe to come full circle on this, the tennis courts were an item that failed on the building condition survey. Those existing courts were built over an old pond. I wasn't here when that was done. I don't think any of us were really. That was back done in the 60s. So there's a reason why those have been an issue for years. And their location right now is a safety concern because of the leaves and the debris that blow off of the trees there and cause the surface to be slick. So with the athletic department, we investigated various areas to put the courts. Putting those courts where they are in the site plan here took over an existing field. So then where were we going to put the existing field? Could we put it back where the tennis courts currently are? It doesn't fit there. So then the conversation went to what are the other needs that are high list on the district's priority list? Where are the other conflicts? Well, if we're going to build another grass field to offset the field that we're losing, what's the difference in cost to making a turf field? So that was where that justification came from for going tennis courts and a turf field adjacent to each other because of a loss of a field in that area.
So now you're going to have the main turf field and you're going to have this extra turf field so that you can have multiple games going on time. And there isn't even close to enough parking. Now, I know you said you talked about parking, but where could you possibly add additional parking? Because it's a nightmare up there with just one game going on, or just say one outdoor game and possibly a swimming event or an indoor court event. The parking is,
Well, the main parking lot on the high school, you have the athletic parking lot.
Right.
And then you have the parking lot up by the stadium. There's also a small parking lot by the elevated field. But typically, even when we have a football game and there's 1,000 people in the main parking lot, we're able to pretty much cover all the parking. Now, it's not very close. It is a walk, but there is ample parking to cover those kinds of events. And so if you're having a soccer game at the same time you're having a field hockey game, the attendance is not anywhere near that. And so even if we have multiple games going on at the same time, it's also because we have a more, I would say, a larger issue around the practice schedule. So, getting kids onto the turf has been an issue for just conflicts between the sports, between, the sports that are happening in the fall and that need to be on the turf. So they're starting their practices later and later into the day just because there's that level of participation. And so the extra field will really give us a lot of relief in that regard. And that's honestly just meeting the needs of the teams. As the number of kids that we participate, which is really a good problem.
We had doubled the size of the main parking lot in 96, 97. Just west of the main entrance of the high school. And also the parking lot just west of the gym. That was added over time. So from the time the school was built originally, we added quite a few parking.
As we get into the project, we might want to look at signage and things like that if the use changes, because I think a lot of folks, especially if you're visiting for a game, they may not understand what the parking options are, so they all try to cram in one space. So I think there are other options there. It's a good point that we could consider how we communicate to folks where they can put their cars to go see there.
and perhaps adding more handicap. There's a lot of grandparents.
I would say communicating with the state schools and their bus drivers who sometimes take up multiple spots.
Yes.
Which is extremely frustrating. But yeah, I agree with what you said, is that, from my experience, people all try to cram into the athletic lot, not knowing that this giant main lot exists. Which is great for me because I get a great spot.
But also, I think that Andy, more handicap.
already been in access because we do provide assistance from parking lots to city. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I caught this. How long of a period to do the work that's proposed?
Right now, we are experimenting and toying with the schedule. We're looking at a two-phase project. Nothing is finalized yet, but the goal of that would be to expedite some of the design, try to get it into the state education department sooner. We don't trust the 8 to 10 week time period on their review. So it would most likely phase itself out over 2 construction summers, 24 and 25, tentatively. But that is all very dependent on state education department and then currently lead times on materials and availability.
So
I'd
if
say
you're,
overall,
if you're not taking bids until December of 24, how are you going to be doing work in something in the summer of 24?
January
You said
20,
you said
December
20.
23, January 24.
Okay,
starting working in the spring.
got it, okay. And the last capital project, when they did the turf, a lot of the kids missed out on seasons of, because of, I don't know what the was, but whatever. Is there going to be some sort of penalty, so to speak, built into accepting the bids? That this project needs to be done on time so that it just, by the 3rd week in August or whatever, when the fall schedule starts, so as to make sure the construction firms get it done, so
Yeah,
kids
the
don't miss
last
out.
project, the stadium was built on time, according to the schedule that had been put into the bidding documents. And again, it's a function of when you're able to bid the project based on when SED approves the project, then having the time for submittals and approvals, and then ordering materials to make sure that the material is on hand. So, we'll build all those controls into the bidding documents. We have found that penalties on school project construction work is not the way to go. Managing the contractors closely, supporting the contractors, and working as a team to build a project on time is the way to do it. So, and I can tell you that the projects that we've been involved with, starting in 96, 97, and around 2008 and 2010, and then most recently, where those projects have been built on time, and with minor exceptions of extraordinary lead times for material.
I think we're very fortunate as well to have some really hardworking folks in the athletic department and with our neighboring schools to find ways to manage seasons so that the kids still got to play. They just played on neighboring pool property.
Yeah.
The kids did not lose their seasons. They
I guess
just
they
had to
lost the
work.
whole field, I guess.
Yes,
And
but
it
not
takes
as
time to build
very
an
different.
athletic stadium like that. So if you can start it in the spring, say March, there's a good chance you're gonna have it ready for the first game of the season. If you're not able to start until the summertime, it's not gonna be ready in the fall. So, there are things that, impact your ability to, if you can start the project on time, you don't have limitations based on SED delays or what have you, then, we can manage the work to make sure it's done within the time frame that's allowed for within the budget.
And
Mrs. Horning, I just want to put you on pause for just a second. Because I'm happy for the opportunity to have the conversation. I think we're covering some really good topics, but I want to ask if there's anyone else who would like to comment or ask questions on the project. Appreciate you all being here very much. Any other questions or comments?
I just had one more, and it was on one of the slides. I just didn't understand what it is. There was something about you went, like you said, you went quickly, so I took notes quickly. Something about a retirement of existing debt, 9%. Keep
Right,
going.
could you Yeah, the district from its prior capital project, when that debt was issued for prior projects, then it's starting to roll off. Meaning
What does that mean?
Paid,
was that,
loan was paid.
yeah, the debt from those projects is gonna be paid off. So essentially, the district's debt service will decline beginning in 24. But when the new project comes on, it takes advantage of that decrease in debt service from prior projects.
The taxes remain level, so there aren't spikes and downs.
And that's normal, for districts throughout the state. You'll see projects every 5 or 6 years. It's really to take advantage of older projects start to fall off, take advantage of the decrease in debt service.
So basically just to keep the district in debt.
Yes. Oh, to keep it flat.
This is how you manage to maintain your buildings and grounds and not cause increases in taxes that come out of nowhere.
Okay.
The term fall off could be confusing for when you're talking about building a building.
Seems like a bad thing.
Yes.
I think,
Following up, that'd be good.
yes, so one of the questions that I'm hearing from a few community members as well is like, great, all of these are wonderful. But when it comes to things like the baseball and softball field, that are not usable, and when you see the number of kids out in the spring trying to get gym space, trying to practice, and they can't even step onto grass or field, I'm new here. So where is that money coming from? What can we do now what can we do in the meantime to get those kids on fields?
That's why I brought up the.
Yeah, I would just add on the state aid rules. Unfortunately, because baseball fields and parking lots are considered site work or incidental expense for the project,
Okay.
the state does have a ceiling on how much of those type of expenses they'll aid in a certain period of time. So when you think about doing the baseball fields now, if that was the case, every single dollar spent on those fields would be 100% local share to the taxpayers, and no building aid will be received on those projects. If you wait another 5 years, the state then resets what's called an incidental allowance for aid purposes. That'll give another opportunity down the road to receive aid on a portion of those fields. But if it was done now, it would be 0% aid because of the way the state caps the amount of work done outside of the building's envelope.
Well, and in the meantime, your issue about what you do now to get the children out there. In the meantime, I watched them build the current baseball field, the one that's right next to the parking lot. And it has a drainage system under it, perfectly designed. All the tiles you're talking about, they're there. And it was all dug out. It was properly designed and drained, but it's not drained. And so so that's what you were talking about, of getting some people in there who know about this sort of thing to scope those pipes and to find out why it's not draining, and then have a remedial work done. Not rebuilding the whole thing, but figuring out how to get it to
We
drain.
haven't had diamond dirt on either.
Exactly. And it all goes back to the clay. That 100 acres up there is heavy clay. I used to live on Sweetwood, and I'd sink up to my ankles when I tried to mow my lawn in the spring.
See them do shot put. They're up to their knees.
It's only so much you can do with that kind of land, which is one of the reasons why the turf field is so helpful. It's because it's not susceptible to that kind of issue that prevents you from even being able to use it at all. And that's one of the reasons I supported it. I always felt it was fine for a football team to play up to that, but if you get out there and you literally can't play, then that's a problem. So I was disappointed when the baseball field was built, because I sat here as a board member listening to the baseball supporters, what do they call them? The boosters. Thank you. The baseball boosters coming and saying, "Couldn't you please build us a field? We always have to go to Hamlin Park." Well, Hamlin Park drains beautifully. It's all gravel and it's dirt. And the soccer field we built and the softball diamond we built in Parkdale are perfect. Those are beautiful fields. And so I think we have to take advantage of what we've got. So if we've got an important softball, take it apart. Because it's a beautiful.
We do, but it's the same thing that we're talking about with the number of kids practicing, number of kids out there, that they really spend the majority of their time in the park.
Right, and so the water study is really, like, again, what are our immediate needs, are there any things that they can determine that are collapsing or there's some kind of, reason that the water isn't flowing? And then how do we repair that in a way for the water so that it could repair current things that we have? Or we would say that really we want it to be viable, the level of participation that we have, that the turf option would be also. But again, it becomes over time. That
Yeah,
water study takes time.
Yeah, we're working on it. We just ask that, you understand that we're gonna come back with a recommendation of findings. And, maybe it will be doom and gloom. I don't know. I'm hoping not. I'm hoping we can have some mitigation steps that, there's some contingency, there's some money in there. Maybe there's work that we're doing adjacent to it on the tennis courts that we'll be able to tie something in and help. But until that water study is completed, it would be permissive me to say what's gonna happen with that.
Do you have a time frame, like even a ballpark, when this water study should be completed so that be at least for next year, have some idea?
It would be,
Like-
we're gonna get caught up in the winter here sooner or later.
Right, that's
But,
right.
ideally, scoping and all of that work would be completed before the weather turns too bad.
Okay.
And then there'll be some time for our engineers to evaluate what those findings are and potentially come up with an alternative solution. So ideally spring at the latest, if not over the winter months. January.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank you for the books and the media center.
Yes. New rendering. The new rendering.
Oh.
You didn't see the new rendering yet? If you can have it, just gonna be.
You mentioned, Stephen, thank you for adding books.
Thanks.
Yes, appreciate that.
We are moving on to, stay with us for the right, folks. We're up, down, all around. Items requiring board action. Item A, the superintendent recommends the Board of Education provide authorize the district treasurer to increase the reserve, the capital reserve, and the repair reserve as detailed in your agenda. I have motion by Mr. Flowers,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Bronson. Discussion?
This was discussed at the audit committee, a lot of things were discussed. So yes, it still makes sense to the group there. It makes sense. Yeah, it maintains our 12% unappropriated fund balance and takes advantage of the increased revenue we had that we reported to us tonight by the auditors to beef up the two reserves that are most.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Carried 7-0. Item B, superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the resolution for transfer of funds from the old reserve, and repair reserve to the new repair reserve as detailed in your agenda. Moved by Mr. Flowers, seconded by Mr. Renton. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Carried 7-0. Item C, the superintendent recommends the Board of Education accept the audit for the 2021-2022 general purpose financial statements and extra classroom activity funds. Moved by Mr. Flowers, seconded by Mr. Preston. Discussion?
Yeah.
Mr. Preston, you get to go first.
No.
Really?
Thanks.
Sorry, you'll find
The committee recognized certainly the good work of the business administrator staff, and we support the board approving resolution to accept the audit report presented. And I just kind of want to throw in a little bit about the amount of work went into having an audit this successful. You start adding in the grants, the GASB requirements, certainly the reporting to the state, the surveys that are required. It's a lot of work on top of already managing the job. So, the audit was clean and the work was well done. Grants is
A lot of what happens. I just want to make sure I bring it up. I don't want to treat myself, but we're paying attention to the next few years. Just like, it's not just that department, a lot of departments, things just keep getting added out of the same personnel. And everybody steps up to the plate in this case. So,
And Paul, thank you for coordinating the audit committee. Because that's not easy. We have reschedules and doing it in a timely fashion and making sure everything is being covered. So we appreciate you.
the audit committee is made up of 4 people, but the questions are high level, and it's interesting to talk finances and stuff. It's not just people holding down a seat to meet the state requirements and control requirements that they have. It was an hour and a half discussion, and a lot was accomplished.
And all 4 of those folks, I think, with 3 of the 4, with the exception of me, they all have really strong backgrounds in finance. I kind of hang on by my fingernails, but it's, people who have the quality built to that for it. We're just so fortunate to have him as part of it.
Like I think the auditor said that in that regard, that not all schools have that level of expertise in their audit. We are fortunate, sure. Again, I'd like to thank Ms. George and her team. It's a crazy amount of work that mall and then the day-to-day grind is continuing, right? There's all these things that are happening that we still have to attend to, and then making sure that the audit is working closely with the auditors, providing them with all the information that they need to create this report. And they have obligations, that they're also held by a lot of regulations by the state, so they're not just doing it haphazardly. There's purpose behind this, I guess. Sometimes it's the burdens, like he's saying, there's a new GASB thing that we have to deal with for next year. And so there's just additions on top of additions every single year, which makes it very challenging. So thank you for all your work.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carried 7-0. Item D, the superintendent recommends the Board of Education accept the 2021-2022 financial statement audit and management letter corrective action plans as detailed in your agenda. Have a motion.
I'll move.
Moved by Mr. Flowers. Second by Ms. Delisle. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carried 7-0. Moving on to item 6, surprise superintendent's comments.
Yeah, so I have a few. And I'd just like to start off with, we received a decision today in the Commissioner's appeal by petitioners Cole, Kavanaugh, Horning, Rogers, and Shoemaker, which was commenced in December of 2021 and sought to remove myself and each of the 4 members of education. As we had hoped, the commissioner denied the application for the removal, and therefore the appeal was dismissed. She also issued a certification of good faith, which confirms that the individual respondents, the superintendent and board members, did not act in bad faith. So we're really glad to hear this, and I think glad to be able to put this behind us as well. So I wanted to share that with the board. And then I received a notice from the New York State School Boards Association. I'll just share that with you now. The New York State School Boards Association, NISBA, recognition program is designed to acknowledge those school board members who strive to continually expand their governance knowledge and skills. NISBA's recognition program is comprised of 4 achievement levels, which are reached by accumulating points for participating in various NISBA training activities, including state-mandated training workshops, board officer academy, legal workshops, convention-related events, or custom board retreats. And so the Board Achievement Award goes to Kimberly Daniel. Congratulations.
Like learning.
Oh, sorry. And a lot of good things going on in each of the schools, but I know that, and we've had a number of committee meetings, but you usually report out on that, and I'll let the principals and directors share what's going on. So, and we'll.
Yeah. Board president and board member comments. I have a few things this evening. I think we'll save the policy committee because we have the policy committee next. We have our items to discuss discuss later. I'm gonna save that for later. I would like to point out last month at our September meeting, a community member indicated that the meeting notice wasn't posted. In fact, the meeting notice was posted on the district's website on September 2nd. Thank you to Mrs. Maidano and her team. It is so easy to find things on the website right now, even phone. Meeting notices, I found the meeting notice on the homepage under the news feed. It's also under the Board of Education page. Additionally, a simple search for the Board of Ed meeting turns it up very easily. And the meeting notice was mailed to the press on September 1st. I would like to offer a sincere apology to the district clerk for not correcting that misstatement at the prior meeting, because of course, as always, you posted the meeting notices as you always do. Thank you for your dedication and years of service. And I apologize if I missed that one. But thank you again, because those things are super easy to find on the website. I attended the NISBA Delegates Assembly this past Monday. Anyone would like to join, I think, holy cow, that was a record length of time. I believe it came in at 5 hours and 50 minutes. Fortunately, from the comfort of my dining room, there were 43 resolutions that we all reviewed and decided what our thoughts were on them. They were all discussed at length, according to proper parliamentary procedure. Of the resolutions that were recommended for adoption, 3 of those did fail. One was on the requirements for specific training and licensure for licensed security guards. The next one that failed was supporting legislation at the state level for school boards to receive a stipend. I thought this one was particularly interesting. Those board members that spoke against it were of the mind like, no, we don't want this to become a thing people do for money. But the point that I think some of us may have been inclined to miss was districts and other areas where folks are precluded from participating, board participation, because they cannot afford to for reasons of childcare, transportation, or having to work a night job. So I think as we think about our DEI work and how we make things equitable for all, considering what we may think is not necessary may truly be necessary to others. Unfortunately, not enough folks agreed with that, and it failed. And the third failure was supporting legislation that would reform current gun laws. There was debate about whether or not a school board association should be playing in that field. There was a great deal of discussion over the proposed resolutions that were not supported by the resolution committee. All discussion happened, and all of those also failed. Any questions? I can fill you in on any.
Tell us more about this gun resolution.
The gun resolution was, and what was interesting in the process, that part of the reason some of these things failed was wording. So when you got into some of them, there would be very logical questions about what exactly does this mean? What is NISBA actually asking the state for? This isn't clear. So some things, I think, some of the ones that failed, failed for language choices. Really, the security guard issue, for example, was very directive and made people uncomfortable in that it would require more than would be possible for many. With the guns, I think it was also similar, that there was an amendment added that required storage in a specific way. It got very, very detailed. So the initial list, I'm sorry, I don't have the amendment with me. I didn't bother collecting it since it failed, but the proposed resolution was to reform current gun laws to strengthen background checks, implementing red flag laws, which exist, as well as laws that will restrict guns from those under the age of 21. So, and then there was another piece added for storage requirements. Some folks disagreed with the storage requirements, thinking how was that a school board issue, or how are school boards going to be sure this happens, and what business did we have policing such a thing? And then the others talked about the age 21 not working for them because they were in rural areas and where there was trap shooting and other things, or kids who were allowed to go hunting would not be allowed to have guns. It brought up a lot of complications.
Well, it's interesting. There's 700 or more school districts Most of them are up in the rural parts.
Yeah.
Of the state. And, so this, the voting delegates, it's not based on population, it's based on, you're just voting for
Every-
that school district.
Every district who is part of NISBA. So you have to be a member of
That's a
your
vote.
state school board association, and you have to choose to participate in the delegate assembly vote,
Sure.
right? So I didn't record the percentages, but the numbers dropped significantly because we started with 301 people, and then later we got in the evening, Jay Warona would keep reminding us to not give up because we needed a quorum. So by the end, there, I think we were down in the low 200s. We needed 200 for the quorum, and some of the resolutions that were not supported that came up for discussion anyway would pass by 30% or fail by 30. They would 30% would vote for it and it would fail. But the numbers are kind of skewed by that point because the people who are sticking around are often the ones who are supporting.
The net result is that NISBA takes no position on it. Can't see that.
NISBA takes no position on it. I think that's correct. Yes. Other questions?
During discussion on your electric buses, and I was on the road.
There was, that one, I actually did mark which ones, folks commented on, and there was no discussion with the chat.
What about on the slot? See if they were not.
Yes, there was a great deal of discussion about that one. And an interesting one, that one had of the ones that didn't come up, weren't supported initially, that one had one of the highest rates of support, after the conversation. So there was apparently in Long Island, this is a very big deal because a lot of single occupancy homes that got lots of families moving in. And this is causing severe stress on the school districts. They're having enrollment through the roof.
Right.
And they have no means of collecting taxes to cover their expenses.
Yeah.
But we also recognize that some folks that are tripling up their families in a single area probably don't have a lot of spare funds for those taxes in the first place.
And my understanding is the state looking to implement some sort of, the removal of the ban on, having accessory dwelling units on the property. They were looking to figure out how they understand how it's going to impact school districts, but they didn't have a solution for how to address that. So I'm just glad to see that there was a good discussion.
Yeah, that
One
was,
that
it seems like a very messy one, and I think we'll be talking about it.
Yeah, I don't know how much it's specifically going to affect us. East Aurora has a great deal of grandfathered accessory dwelling units, the carriage houses. We used to have one on Center Street, the house that we owned, and there's a lot of that thing. But our village officials are very aware of what can happen if you start making a lot of concessions so on.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Still, sure, thank you. It's a fascinating process. It's long, but it's very interesting.
And are you doing the law school? Well, this next week, are you doing the Wednesday thing?
No, because I did it this summer. And then I did another summer.
Don't they vote then too, or they don't?
I don't talk that.
That's a point system.
Well, yeah, but only one was for NISBA, the other was Erie County, it was the Erie County.
Yeah.
But it must be, I think it's accrued over all of my lifetime on the board, because it's been 75. That's not just for this, it's gotta be. It's unclear.
This is, and Rhoda and I met, Ms. Lyons and Mr. Waggle, a couple weeks ago for the curriculum committee, and, Mr. Weigel was looking to have an 8th grade book approved, and it's titled March Book 2. It's written by John Lewis, who himself was a key figure in the civil rights movement, but one who is not often mentioned at all. It's a graphic novel, and it was recognized by YALSA, it's Great Graphic Novels for Teens, and the 2016 Eisner Award for Best Reality-Based Book. we looked at it and it was absolutely amazing. It's a 3-part series and he chose to do the second one. And ironically, when I sat down here tonight, I looked back here and this is the first book. So the middle school already has it here and this is March book 1. So it's a graphic novel and it's absolutely, again, amazing. And as we approved earlier in the year, graphic novels for the English departments. These type of books really seem to be grabbing the students, and they're absolutely amazing. So we have this one here. It's called March 2. That's the one that we're going to be using for all of the 8th graders. I do believe it's January, February is when it's going to use it with kids. But it's an incredible book and it's won a lot of awards. So we will be voting on that later. The other thing I wanted to do is I want to say thank you to our principals, Parkdale and middle school, for inviting all of us into your schools today. It was an incredible day. That is always my favorite day of the year, is when we get to go into the schools and have these visitations, and the wealth of knowledge that we get from the teachers, from the staff, and from the principals. It really helps us to understand what's going on in your schools. And it really helps us when we start thinking about budget season and what you need, what you want, the needs of the students. It's just a really eye-opening experience for us every year. So thank you, the 4 of you, very much for allowing us to come into the buildings today. We are going to do the high school another week and a half, remember? So if you can remember, we'll be in the high school in the morning, and I'll send out a reminder.
Thank you very much to you and Ms. Flowers for coordinating.
Okay, well,
Mrs. Rhoda?
So yes, I totally enjoyed that book. Actually, I found it riveting. It was one of those, like, I'll just glance at this and then I couldn't put it down. Then I was so excited to discuss it and the new things I learned in the book. So I was excited about that. I'm sure the principals are going to talk about homecoming activities, but I was really fortunate to go to all of the homecoming activities and to help out at the homecoming dance. And it was amazing. And I'm sure you'll mention the number of students there, but it was just amazing to see the number of students that were engaging. So I'm hoping you'll give us the exact numbers that were there. Homecoming was just absolutely awesome, from the parade to the powder puff game, was really so incredibly full. To the game, and then to obviously the homecoming dance. So I look forward to hear the high school impression on that as well. And the visitations today. I have 2 takeaways from the visitations today. I know that it was probably it's a lot of work to organize this, and we wander around and we disrupt classes, and it was amazing to see the classes in action, especially to see some of the things that have been talked about, and then I see them implemented. Everything from the SEL programs to probably, well, 2 things. One is I kept hearing the phrase, well, we make it work. We make it work. Or we get creative. And those were things that I thought, well, this is awesome. Because during the COVID time, you had to kind of figure it out and kind of make it work. And then I sat there and some of these things that, like, well, we're making it work, we're getting creative. And that's when I thought, well, this is that's awesome. And that's the attitude you want to have, but how can we help with that? They're just making it work. What can we do to make it more pleasurable than just making it work? And how long can a person just get creative on something? So that really got my mind working, and I look forward to talking with the principals on some of those solutions. I don't know. We can move on that. But my favorite part of the day, and I told a couple of you, was there was a little boy who had sent me a video in the spring, and he talked about how he really wanted his program to be at Parkdale and how important it was for him for the budget to pass. And he's this little boy, and he sends me this video that just tugged every heartstring. And I had sent back to his mother and said that was the most amazing thing. What an articulate boy, and I love dinosaurs too. And it really struck me that there's real people on the other end of every single vote that we make. And not just real people, not just the parents, but there's kids that are really emotionally invested. Even little kids are invested in what's going on. And we walked into this classroom, and there was this little boy, And I said, wait, are you? And he said, are you?
Oh.
And he gave me this hug. And I was crying because I said, you sent me a video. I remember everything. And then he said to me, and I remember everything you said. And I'm here in this classroom, and my sister's here too. And I'm so happy. And then a couple of the other kids there said, I'm here now too. I'm here now too. And then he gave me a tour of his classroom. And I lost the rest of the group because I stayed with them because they gave me a tour of their classroom and they were so proud of what they were doing. And this boy was so articulate, and because he's there, he's also able to push into other classrooms for the skills that he's really exceptional at. And it was one of those moments that I was like, this is why I ran for the board. These are the stories. This is what's behind all of these numbers, all of these things we're doing, is this little boy who is so proud of this classroom and the teachers that are they're teaching them and the support that they get from the administration. But it's this boy. And I said goodbye to all the kids, and we had conversations about Godzilla and dinosaur. And then as I was saying goodbye, he goes, hey, Maria Protuda. And I was like, what? And he goes, I love you. I was like, I love you too. Like, it was such a moment. And I just really wanted to share that with everybody because that's why we're here. Yeah.
I have a staff.
Wow.
I like
My favorite moment was far less. But it was when the one boy walked down the hall with Mr. Flowers and said, wow, look at the big guy. Referred to him as the big guy. No, a lot of my comments have been, will be addressed when we talk about, or, when we're talking about the visits or since Danny involved, but the visits were fantastic last year. It was my one of the best things. It's so reaffirming of the work that is done in the district to see it happen. To sit and talk is one thing, but to be there and to be in the schools it's such a blessing to get that opportunity. So I'm thankful for the principals to invite us in. One, Mrs. Improta's point, hearing we make it work is great, but how do we help to make it work without having to make it work was good. And some of the comments around how in both schools we heard how there's not enough space, right? And that is, it's my mind immediately went to, well, how is that even possible? Especially if we have fewer students than we have in the past. Like then you think about it, and you think, well, we added pre-K, we've added 811 classes, we've added all these things that are so important and so valuable to the education we're providing. Yeah, of course we're running out of space. We're shifting one for another, and a comment that was brought up was discussing on a more regular basis. How we do the building conditions survey every 5 years is how do the facilities fit the way we teach today, right? And understanding that was done in planning for the Parkdale addition, but I don't know if that's discussed specifically within the building conditions survey if there's a regular thing, but if there's not, I feel like that should be an every couple of years at the very least sort of thing where we're talking about, because we're changing so much, so all the time, that the needs of the district aren't always going to be met by the way we're constructed today. And so how can we plan for that? Because we can plan for it now and it's going to change next year. And then it's always going to change.
Well, probably one of the most unexpected changes was right. So we had a relationship last year where we had one class at 2 outside. And then as we move forward, and unfortunately, we typically get this information really late in the process. So they gave us additional funding for UPK. Even when we went to the initial, we had like months to pull. Usually, like UPK takes an entire year. Right? Mrs. Marinaccia did a fantastic job reaching out and moving the process along. and actually getting assistance from them because the process is it's cumbersome for one of the special ed folks. We're looking at it as a 60-page application. Still have the time to do those types of things. So to her credit, she reached out to them and said, we can't do this. They sent somebody to say that to help us do the applications. Because they're really impressed with what we were doing, right? They were really quick. They were like, wow, we really need this, kids, and we can help you to do it. But all of this comes within months, right? We have to turn it around. So we went from having one UPA class to 4 in the building. So Ms. Pantoja, Ms. Marinaccio are scrambling to move it around. Where are we going to find the space? Where are we going to move out? Relationships with boys and girls stuff, all that other stuff. The other special ed programs in the universities. There's a lot to consider. So when we're looking at this really great expansion of this program, is fantastic for our community, but the long-term planning has been part of this process. It was even mentioned in the initial plans for Parkdale that the idea of if UBK continues to grow, we're going to probably need to renovate that space and maybe even add additional classrooms to accommodate a 3 and 4-year-old program, which supposedly is the intent of the federal budget. If they're pushing in that direction to provide services for expanding 4-year-old services and then the 3-year-old services. And so if that happens, that's already been part of the process. And even when he mentioned about the contingency about classroom renovation at Parkdale, that could be part of the process as well.
And it's going to be an ever changing goal. But the conversations, I think, are the ones that will help us get to where we need to, where we don't have to make work, but also will help to educate further capital projects down the road. We'll see it coming much more. But no, I'm good to go to the big guy.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Flowers.
I have a title like that. Madam President, when
Yes, big
people
guy.
ask me what I enjoy most about retirement, I say not attending meetings. As I sit here, I just made a note about the school open, visitation committees, several facility projects committees, audit committees, Erie County Association of School Boards. So I'd like to change my
Yeah, just don't
about
count.
retirement.
Just
Keep
don't-
going up, Paul. They'll send you a certificate.
Yes. We all work.
But anyway, keeping with the Erie County School Boards, and touch on all the other ones. September 22nd, Association of School Board Legislative Committee. Because they're set for tomorrow night. A lot of initiatives set out. They put together a pamphlet, Erie County Association of School Boards takes a stand on certain issues. So we still are a school board. Some kind of stands. Several, those are the stands that could be. Talk to legislators and stuff. And legislative breakfast is definitely November next. I don't know if I can make that. Yeah. Once it's over, it's going to be this year. Allowing more attendance. Just wanted to share that with the one. Mr. Cassidy attended Erie County Association of School Boards. A recent dinner featured Dr. Rick Timms, who's a keynote speaker. There's a lot of interesting thoughts in the presentation. I think the one that only relates to post foundation aid as it relates to the state of New York and school. How that's all going to play out, I think that they're required making good on foundation. So I think as we go through the 24, 25 budget, grants are drying up and there's no foundation aid laws in place. What that sort of look like. So some of the stuff we'll bring up during the budget and finance committee for budget projections. So we'll bring public in. Some of the thoughts are a little bit of our, looking at possible deficits with the state of New York, significant deficits where the trends are running. So those kind of things I have for the budget. I'll let you know. Going to me.
Thank you for attending the meetings. It's very good. Bronson?
Thank you. Interesting conversation regarding reacting to change and how our facilities and our staffing work together to implement some of these new issues or address some of the problems that are not anticipated. I think in the past, we have to some extent anticipated some of it. When we divided the school district into 3 buildings with K-4, 5, 8, and 9, 12, we added that big addition onto the Parkdale School. I think we anticipated at that time that we needed elbow, and we didn't know exactly what programs were going to come along that needed that space, but we built the space. So when they say they're making do, there are spaces for all those new staff members that you've employed over the last year. They all have a little corner somewhere, and it's tighter than it was, but it's accommodating things. The challenge is going to be because building projects take so long to initiate it, to have enough foresight to say, are we building in enough flexibility as we move forward to be able to address new programs, new staff members that we don't even know are going to exist 5 years from now. So I think to some extent we're doing a great job. It's easier to implement a new program than it is to build a new building. You know, and having the program succeed becomes a justification to go to the community and say, well, we need more to help us accomplish this. So we've got such a wonderful UPK program here, and I would have no problem going to the community and saying, well, now they need a little help to have whether it's some additional classrooms, whether it's enhancement of existing because everybody in the community knows how great it is. Everybody I bumped into. So I think things are not very gloomy. I think I'm optimistic that as long as we do the best we can to build flexibility, that we'll be able to accommodate these new programs or new issues when they pop up.
Thank you, Ms. Renner. I echo everything else said. It is a highlight of the year to be able to go and do that, to see it. And I sort of think back in the evolution from when we were at half day kindergarten and trying to figure out how we could get to full day kindergarten to now. It's wonderful and really proud. And it was wonderful sitting down. We go into all of it, but sitting down, having a chance to speak with all the different administrators, teachers, and to really learn. It helps us so much in doing this job. I feel like it's just a vital part of what we do every year is getting the chance to go into the semester. But I'm going to change and say, Mr. Cassie and I attended the Athletic Advisory Council committee on October 11th, and we had presentations from representatives for indoor track and boys hockey about potentially adding those sports, and we basically were just doing fact finding and getting some initial information. We also spoke about the update on the building project, just gave a general overview to people on the committee about that, update on the culvert project, dual sport and same season sports. Some different ideas were tossed around about banquets for the end of the year. Sports teams, whether or not to do like one big banquet for all the different sports teams. But it's just sort of all of this is just kind of general discussion that we were having. We discussed the mental health awareness, the different groups that are working together to help incorporate these different mental health programs with our athletes, our coaches. And then we talked about just the policy with respect to academics and extracurricular activities. And we're going to be looking at that as a board. It's just basically a policy with respect to when students are struggling in school or how that works in terms of eating and athletics. So that's going to be something that we will be presenting. So I don't know if there's anything.
I'll just add one quick comment. I did get some inquiries about like the approval. So I think there was some confusion, maybe a little bit, that came out of me. So I just wanted to say that there have been no decisions made about approval of any new sports. So I just wanted to clarify that. I thought you did a good job, but I received a few phone calls about it, and I just wanted to make sure that they're still moving through the process. We weren't really doing any kind of adding during the last 2 years because of COVID and the issues related to our athletic teams, the difficulty with possibly expanding. But again, it's something that we're going to consider. And that's why that group exists, to listen to those groups who are interested in adding or expanding a current sport. And, we take that information and then they bring it back to the administrative team and then we share with the board. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Anything else with Dave? Thank you. Thank you all very much. Moving on to administrator comments.